Hello and welcome to some more Star Citizen. Cloud Imperium have released an Invictus launch week and Alpha 3.9 Postmortem that looks at lessons learned from Fleet Week, the event that they had during the 3.9 branch, and 3.9 itself, its successes, its failures. There's some pretty interesting information there, and I wanted to do a summary of that. The first in-game Fleet Week started on the 22nd of May 2020 and ran through to the 2nd of June. It was a massive sale in-game event and free fly. It was a test and glimpse of future events that they plan to run in the verse as well. They had some cool teaser trailers, they had some great visuals going on there, they made a huge amount of money during a sale, and there was quite a lot to do for players in the verse. The Star Citizen universe is meant to be alive and dynamic, potentially more so than any other MMO before it, and while they're still in alpha and have a fair way to go, it's already a live service game. As such, they wanted to demonstrate a sliver of what a live event could be like in-game and test out a number of firsts, including an introduction to the massive capital ships in-game, the Idris and the Javelin there, as well as little fleets that support them, little groups of fighters. They wanted to mess around with event triggers and much tighter integration between out-of-game and in-game events. This actually saw Cloud Imperium raise over $15 million in May 2020. That's the most that they've ever raised in a single month, and that's mostly because Fleet Week resided in that month. There are a number of other sort of record breakers there as well during Fleet Week and 3.9's branch. Player engagement and player concurrency for peak player counts were at record highs, pushing on the previous numbers by 50% on concurrency. In fact, unique players during those 12 days of Fleet Week were greater than every single month up to that point in the entire history of Star Citizen's operation. That's a lot of people playing in those 12 days, although I don't actually have the exact numbers, so maybe it's not a lot of people, but it is a lot of people. However, the servers, back-end services, and login servers were under a lot of pressure and often overloaded due to this, and there were major accessibility problems, crashes, and disconnects all throughout 3.9's branch, but also mainly during that Fleet Week and Free Fly period. The start of Fleet Week was extremely bad for this. They simply underestimated the sheer amount of players logging into play, and they are making some changes, and they've been able to plan ahead quite a bit. So partly pushed due to Fleet Week issues, there are some major updates arriving in Q4 2020 to help with the future of scalability, bottlenecking, and server issues. Things they are working on, like the iCache along with the back-end services and network improvements, will really help. Basically, as one of the problems was that some players have massive amounts of items, and the servers need to be able to deal with them. They need to be able to load them in, remove them, and the servers sort of like get degraded over time, and when there's a load of players all logging on at once with huge amounts of items, that can cause some problems, especially when they're on their old tech. They are very much on their old legacy network tech for a lot of this stuff, and they don't want to be anymore. So Cloud Imperium said, our vision is to ultimately not have hundreds or thousands, but millions of players in the verse. So while the technical issues during Invictus were indeed painful, we emerged from it with renewed effort and immediate actions to prepare us for a larger scale, for bigger and better things later in the year and beyond. And that means millions more will be able to enjoy a better Star Citizen experience because of the learnings from Invictus launch week. So yes, there were certainly some successes for Fleet Week and the amount of money they raised and that sort of stuff, but there were obviously some big failures as well, which they acknowledge and are working on. Star Citizen 3.9 and 3.9.1's branch had a good little breakdown of some of the features and what they're sort of like working on to improve them. The updated new Babbage landing zones was one of the largest and most complex landing zones they've done to date. They tried to give players more freedom to explore the location and improve the accessibility that players have to the planet through the introduction of surface entrances, moving towards making everything a little bit more seamless. It was the first landing zone built with all the sort of features coming together from all of their tools, or at least used together at the same time during the building process. They expanded the high-tech architectural assets. The team had a great time developing the architectural language and how it fit the narrative of the location and climates. There are new plants, NPCs, items, shops, and lots more. New lighting features were also used to create different moods at different times of the day, and they're currently implementing day and night light designs into some existing locations across the Stanton system, which we should see pretty soon. Microtech's moons, Calliope, Clio, and Euterpe were an exercise in seeing how flexible the new planetary Tech v4 was. I suppose Microtech and the landing zone there as well was for that. But the idea was to see how quickly they could define a unique visual identity for these moons, utilising the existing biome asset packs they had already created. They were able to define some extremely cold and hostile climates to complement the barren landscapes with the addition of the additional player status features. Another major feature and location are prisons and laws to support them that were introduced in 3.9 as well, which was the first time they introduced actually two major ground locations at the same time, I suppose, with the prisons and with New Babbage version 2. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. They're quite sprawling locations, I suppose. The initial iteration of the law and prison system is pretty bare bones versus where they're going to be going with it eventually. The ultimate objective for prisons within Star Citizen is actually a bit ironic in that while they are intending to serve as punishment and something most players will want to avoid, they also want to ensure that they are fun and interesting and that players will view them as simply a different set of opportunities to exploit and have challenges to solve. They don't really want players to be really excited about going to prison unless they've got a mission where they're trying to break in or they've got some sort of gameplay associated like that, maybe. They do want it to be a punishment for certain behaviour types and for adding risk into the game. But they realised that their first iteration, prisons and being locked up, wasn't going to be particularly fun while they haven't got all of the sort of like variety and additional bits that they need to fill out that gameplay. There's a bit of mining, there's a little bit of sort of like being able to escape and stuff and look around as a new location, but it was important at this stage to still get risk and reward and deal with certain types of undesirable gameplay to get that mechanic in and to start evolving it. They wanted to maximise their use of caves for their first prison, for Klesha Prison, so they designed the central hub to feed off into a sprawling cave network for mining, escape routes, and for the prison to sort of just be housed in this interesting area. To ensure that the system's initial shortcomings weren't too pronounced with prisons and the gameplay associated with them, they temporarily limited the sentence durations and made sure to include a way to escape quickly and easily, effectively, albeit at the risk of higher wanted levels if you're recaptured and a longer sentence potentially. One of the major upgrades planned for the next year is going to be focusing on injecting a lot of stealth, timing, and diversionary gameplay into the escape process so that it's much more fun, challenging, and different when you do it. It's not always exactly the same. They want to expand on the escape routes and the experience associated with that, make it a bit more complex, make it a bit more of a challenge as well. For 3.10, they have found and fixed several important bugs for that prison gameplay, including one where after you were released after serving a sentence, your screen would fade down but never fade back up. Kiosk machines actually will now occasionally break as part of gameplay here. Those are all oxygen machines, and you'll be able to get a mission to go and repair those machines, and that will give you some merits as well. So you'll have people sort of like trying to do those missions at the same time, competing to do them. They're going to be adding a number of other prison missions in the future as well. Alpha 3.11 will feature several small but notable enhancements as well, including the ability to surrender to law enforcement at any time during a battle, better use of the ability to impound ships as well, and those impound mechanics, and working commissary kiosks, so the prisoner kiosks, so you can actually buy items there to help leverage the sort of like merits that you've earned to potentially make more merits or to survive in prison. Locked doors, access cards, and codes will start playing an increasingly important role as well. The prison escape routes will be tweaked so that gaining access to the tunnels requires first finding a security code, and then they'll complement that in a future release by making the extraction process considerably more difficult. A couple of locked rovers outside the prison will reward those players who had the foresight to pilfer the access codes with a fast getaway. Departing from prison will eventually be more tightly integrated into the game, so that after you serve your time, you'll then be ferried by a ship to a landing zone to then be released rather than fading down and fading up and all that sort of jazz and teleporting. There's also a lot of work to do on the AI side of things so that guards and inmates can better contribute to making the area look and feel like a prison, but also to some of the gameplay there. They're going to be providing opportunities for melee combat within prisons within the next year as well, including the concept of gangs and introducing some key mission-giving characters. These will include a shady guard and a powerful criminal boss with whom you can start to forge a relationship with, which could prove very valuable on the outside of prison as well. well. Some other mission stuff, the new Price of Freedom mission that had less lawful players assaulting a caterpillar to free some prisoners was built fairly quickly actually, and was influenced by the sort of like 890 jump liberation mission, being that it's sort of evil counterpart. It involves ship combat, EVA, ground combat, and a bit of interactive detective work with some choices on how you complete it. There were some issues with setting the mission up though. The designers were dealing with learning how the new UI building blocks tech worked. The initial collision pass on the Caterpillar wasn't set up for FPS gunplay. Originally the laptop was supposed to be a datapad that the player would have to scroll through to find the right contacts. Because of time constraints they had to use the laptop instead. The actor status system, originally called the player status system, is now much more of a living, breathing system in 3.9, with the system and majority of features in place now, linking many aspects from character animation, environments, items, with sort of hunger, thirst, heat, cold, wind, vision, and movement. It replaces what was a very simple system for players suffocating, sort of like a kill when exposed to space, and has players affected by the environment both visually and mechanically now, and you need to eat and drink and all that sort of jazz. Planet can be cold and you only survive a certain amount of time with your clothes on. If you're wearing a better suit, then you might survive a lot longer, and maybe geysers or some of the environmental areas might give you pockets of warmth. The system for this is now all complete, but they need to connect more aspects to it, including weight, drug effects, and more exotic hazards that depend on other features being completed, such as the physical inventory that they're working on. The system was complex and challenging to design. Future-proofing the system for yet-to-be-added features also created more challenges. It represented a huge amount of disciplines working together on dozens of different tasks to bring it together. The personal inner thought and interaction system. So the personal inner thought system is a step towards giving players a lot more easily accessible interactivity in-game with their characters and actions that they can perform contextually, allowing you to contextually use appropriate items and actions with them in the game quickly. It even introduced some developers and players to actions that they weren't aware of that were possible or aren't obviously shared in the default key mappings. This was a huge challenge, not only to update and replace the bare bones implementation of the old systems, but also to implement a new UI and real-time key mappings onto hundreds of actions. Very, very essential for the game though. It's very much not finished yet though. There's lots more to do with it. Some other important changes that were made that obviously took a lot of effort and that they are continuing to improve are the unified friends lists and chat servers across the game modes and website. They're still putting a lot more love into this. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, but it's even useful things like getting Star Marine and Arena Commander modes now cycling when you're in them, rather than kicking you out and having to remake a game or whatever. Updates to the join in progress for matches so you can join more appropriately, things like that. So I'm really looking forward to Theatres of War making use of stuff like that, and more that they're bringing into the game and iterating on with those features that they mentioned. I really like the idea of these sort of like post-mortem summaries of events and branches. I've actually wanted these for quite a while, and I think it had some very useful information in. But what do you think? Are you looking forward to the evolutions of some of these features throughout 2020 and beyond? Do you think Cloud Imperium should have been more prepared for the amount of users during Fleet Week? Do you like how prisons are evolving? Whatever your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Every month there's a ship giveaway. For the month of July, we have a Banu Merchantman and Star Citizen game package to give away. All you need to do to be in for a chance of winning that is comment on any of my videos made during July 2020. Details to that down below in the links. I'm also a shill for NordVPN. If you're looking for a VPN, then Nord should be considered. It's cheap and fast and helps keep you secure, anonymous, and give you greater access to websites and informations. Use the links below if you're thinking about getting a VPN. Also, a special thank you to Azatec for supporting my content. Find out more down below because they sent me a Alienware Aurora A10. But there's more to it than that, and you can see all the details of my spec down below and all that sort of jazz. If you'd like to further support my channel or content, then please consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or even donating. But sharing, commenting, subscribing, and liking, all of that really does help too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.